Welcome to the Prisoner to Painter podcast, stories of inspiration, where we talk about mental health, addiction, religion, becoming a business owner and self-sufficient, for what, when, where, and why. Join us and we can be your local hope dealer.
Inspiration and dedication. I came a long way from sleeping in them cages. I got my life back, I feel amazing. Life's a book, don't get stuck on sad pages. Rainy days with no money, hard work lead to days that are sunny. Looking back, it was all needed. The problems, the pain, the trauma, the grieving. You are now tuned into the prisoner to painter. Prisoner to painter. Hard work, dedication. Rainy days, inspiration. Prisoner to painter.
And now, a word from your local hope dealer.
It's Aidan.
Yes,
Okay.
Aidan.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, some folks, they don't get it right.
I don't know why I didn't, but I kept pronouncing it Aidan, and I'm like,
Yeah,
dude, I'm not
I get
doing
that.
this right. I'm
I
not
get that.
doing this
We-
right.
We're live.
Oh, yeah. Welcome to the Prisoner to Painter podcast. I'm Nathan McDermott.
And I am Katie
And
McDermott.
today joining us is Aidan Sova.
Yes, absolutely. Excited to be here, everyone.
Man, thank you for coming
Thank you for
on.
coming.
Seriously, I mansplain. But that's just what I do. A lot of people I've been very grateful to have on. Every story is important. You, I believe, is showing that we're going in the right direction. You're a member of the board of the library in Ann Arbor.
Yes.
Sounds like you're part of the board of what's help me out here.
Are they doing a
the
like
farmers market? You're on that board as well.
Grow Jackson, yeah, I was a former
Okay.
board member. Now I'm a community advisor for it.
nice?
Yeah.
So I really want to incorporate that we have on politicians, cops, that we have on anybody and everybody. It just seems like you're doing a lot for the community, no matter what title you give you.
Yeah.
We have one piece of advice from our pastor. Instead of waiting until the end to find out what the person does, will you give us a brief synopsis of what you say
Yeah.
you do?
Who you are and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Aidan Sova. In terms of my day job, I'm a regional product lead at Google,
Okay.
and I have been for 4 years now.
Okay.
Additionally, I was elected to our Ann Arbor District Library Board in 2022, allowing me the honor of being the youngest ever Black person elected in our city's history, as well as being the youngest elected official, just period, currently in Ann
Awesome.
Arbor. Also, if I'm listing my full resume, I'm proud to be on the Emerging Leaders Council for the Legal Services Corporation. It's an entity that's funded by Congress in order to help give access to legal aid. So someone who's underprivileged or underserved, they can have equal legal representation. And then also community advisor to Grow Jackson, which we had some exciting news
Yeah.
today, which I'm sure that you had seen.
Yes, sir. I work right next to it, so it was really huge. to hear
Wow.
that. Yeah, it was really huge.
That's
to hear
really
that.
special.
Well, just seeing it kind of, rock's not the right word, but just seeing
Sure.
it being not used when there's a lot of potential there. So that was
Yeah.
awesome to hear.
I'm really happy that we, as just kind of a city and community, are recognizing that we should be productive with our space.
Yeah.
In some instances, that's going to look like housing and density. In other instances, it's going to be making use of what we already have there. So I think this is a really innovative way to serve the community where it is as well. It's a really bustling part of the city. So yeah, it's thrilling. What can I say?
Awesome, man. Here we start from childhood and we work to where you are now. I believe childhood shows a big part of who you are. Either on purpose or not on purpose. Like it just kind of shows why you are who you are.
Mhm.
So,
And then this is also my book of random questions.
Wow.
It kind of throws some things off, gives me some ideas. If there's something relevant I happen to skim over that you're already talking about, it will also help me be able to ask more efficient questions.
Sure. I love that.
before we go backwards though and start in childhood, I have to ask, man, where did you graduate from? Like college, or did you not?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So I am a proud Jackson High School graduate.
Okay.
Additionally, after that, I graduated from the University of Michigan,
Awesome.
where I have a Bachelor of Arts, go blue, for all my listeners, or maybe even you too.
Yep.
And
For
then-
me.
Yeah, house divided perhaps.
Yeah.
And then I received a Master of Liberal Arts from the University of Pennsylvania
Wow.
as well. Yeah.
You talk so educated. So
Thank you.
you do. I mean, back in the Western days, they would have called you an educated.
No, I appreciate that. Even I'm jumping ahead perhaps a bit, but growing up, both my mother and my uncle were very, very big readers and were, intellectually interested in just any sort of form of humanities. So I would be 6 years old, laying on the kitchen floor, just listening to their debates about the interpretation of this new, Tolkien transcription, right? Or just sort of whatever the intellectual moment was, which was hilarious because, again, I was 6 years old. I still wanted to play with Power Rangers, but just this was something that was happening in the backdrop. And I think that just sort of natural sort of backdrop to my life really helped my interests.
I think it's the way that you articulate the thought process that's very nice.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Tell everyone maybe I should be on the next podcast again and again. Have me whenever.
Yeah, sure. Hey, no, really though, there are some people that I'd like to have back a second time. I can already tell you're going to be one of them that I would like to invite.
It's very kind.
So first off, where did you grow up, and how would you, in a broad sense, say your childhood was?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm proud to have been born and raised here in Jackson, Michigan.
Awesome.
To give some even color to that a bit. So my mother, as well as her siblings, they grew up in Jackson County. And the way our situation came to be, I grew up in a low-income, single-parent household, again, here in Jackson, Michigan. And leading up to that, my mother, her father passed suddenly, and her grandmother had aggressive MS. And so she had to be in nursing homes. And so ostensibly they were all sort of these pseudo orphans, right? They really had to figure out, my mother and her siblings, how to operate, how to be adults when they weren't at that adult sort of phase in life. So when I was born, my mother was 18 years old, and she quickly moves to the corner of 2nd and Biddle Street, 502 West Biddle Street, apartment D, is where I spent, 18 or so years of my life. It's a true shoebox of an apartment. There's one bedroom, and my mother insisted it be mine. And she's an angel, and she slept on, what is the equivalent of a couch in a living room, right? For almost the entirety of our life.
Wow.
In all of that, I think of my uncle, who I mentioned earlier, when my mother was 17, 18, when she was in the process of having me at 18 when I was born, what happens is you just, as a 13-year-old young Uncle Reagan, you have this baby in your arms who you now feel this responsibility for, in which he was a partner to my mother for many years in terms of just caretaking and, helping to lighten the load a bit. And so I spent so many years in that apartment. And in terms of what it looked like growing up, I actually feel, despite the destitution, despite the poverty, I lived in a very loving home. My mother and my uncle were very thrilled to be those leaders, those guidance sort of givers in my life. And in all of this, something, again, I would say is that I had a robust network of community. I grew up as a student of JPS, K through 12. I had track coaches, I had teachers, I had parapros who really took a vested interest in me. And it is because of my mother's love, the care of my uncle, the community support, that I feel that I'm even able to be here with you all today on this podcast.
Dude, if there was nothing else to say about your mom, I already love her. There's nothing else.
I do as well. I do as well. We have a very close relationship.
Wow, that is phenomenal. I mean, you hear of the sacrifice, and I'm sure every parent sacrifices, but then you hear about some parent sacrifices, and it's like that gave me chills.
Absolutely. I think to myself, I'm 26 years old. I think to myself of having a child at 18 or just in that general age bracket. It's not something that, even right now, the thought, I am in a very happy, long relationship with a stable job, with the home, and even the thought of willingly having a child right now, it's something I'm going to do eventually. That scares me, right? Yep. Let alone being 18 and you're in this very unfortunate situation. You have this child thrust upon you, so to speak. It's devastating. So shout out to our single parents, our single mothers everywhere. I'm so grateful.
Who was the most influential person in your life?
Besides my mother and uncle, as you're hearing, I would say I have a few. I'll be brief. So at Jackson High School, we had a principal at the time named Mrs. Barbara Baird Pauling. And I remember, and I hope that she's listening to this, when we first met, she was someone who I felt was always just kind of messing with me at the time. I would be wearing, my book bag, and she would say, go and walk that back to your locker. I wouldn't have an ID on, and she would come into my class and she would walk me to wherever my ID was. I put it on. And at the time, I was just like, man, she really has it out for me. In retrospect, I can see that she was actually the person that was a mentor. She was someone that paid for my senior dues when it came time for it. She took me to my first ever student government meeting in high school. She was someone that came to my swim meets. She encouraged me to be involved in our community. And I remember still to this day, as we're having our sort of final moments before I'm graduating high school, she sits me down and she says, I might have been more involved in your educational journey perhaps than others were, but it's because I legitimately believe in you as a person, and I actually believe that you're going to do the same for other people. That's why I took the time. I always remember that.
Awesome.
Secondarily, this is a fun bit of Jackson history as well. So thinking back to me in my life, again, you're hearing that I'm this low-income student. I don't have much, but you could probably tell that I was motivated by the community support that I received, and I was just this ball of ambitious energy at 14, 15 years old. So what do you do when you want money and you want a job and you want experience? I guess naturally in my 15-year-old brain, I wrote to CEOs locally, wrote them handwritten letters and said, I have a lot to learn, like to be compensated for learning, but what do you have? What could we do? Got a lot of no responses, also got a lot of no's, but one man responded back to me. His name was Mr. Al Glick of Alro Steel. He was the former CEO and chairman of the company. And we arrange a meeting, and I come with, this is hilarious to be clear, I'm 15 or so years old with a 6 or 7 page resume. And I say, well, I was captain of this and senior vice president of this, and I was on newspaper. And he's looking, your resume should only be 1 page. And he's looking through it. He's asking me questions about my upbringing and really what motivated me to be there. And I'm sharing. And he goes, what would you do if this just didn't go well? What if I said that I couldn't have an intern because we've never had an intern before? What if I said that we didn't have the budget for an intern? Like, what would you do from here? And I said, sir, I'd probably write to more CEOs. And he laughs and he says, I really like that. I'm going to have you here as our first ever intern. And throughout these summers, I'd like to give you as much advice and business sort of acumen that I possibly can. And so thinking about those two sort of examples, I think when I was younger, I was at my most tender, I was at my most vulnerable. So their involvement, and again, there's so many people to list, but they just really stick out immediately.
Always relating, dude. I still do that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you have to, dude.
I've emailed Gordon Ramsay once a week for the past 2 years.
As you should.
You're not kidding.
No, because it goes about like this. So you give one day to this restaurant and you turn around this restaurant in 1 day. I am seeking you to turn around my life in one. If you can turn around a failing business in a day, I mean, just give me 12 hours, man.
Totally.
Just give me 12 hours.
Absolutely. Give me 12 hours. Give me 15 minutes on this podcast.
Yeah.
I mean, CC me in the next email. I'll get in there as well.
I tell him all the time that he's just a very expensive therapist who cooks very good food.
That's awesome. It shows me that I'm doing not that I need it. It shows me I'm doing something right too. It's cool to see somebody else did it. Like I'm still repetitively emailing people.
If I can tell you a brief story as well, just to affirm that experience. So I am in undergrad. I'm at the University of Michigan, and I am just a nerd, right? I'm a student government kid, and I find myself to be the executive director of the Association of Big Ten Students. And so what it is it's basically like mega student government where you represent all the students in the Big Ten Conference. It was really, really great and a lot of fun even until you might remember something happened in 2020, the pandemic. And suddenly I'm this sort of point of authority as well as advocacy for 500,000 students. I'm getting calls from students who are saying, listen, my university's telling me I need to go back home. I don't have a home to go back to. I don't have the money to get back home. I'm an international student. I'm literally not allowed to go back home. All these instances. frankly, I am overwhelmed and I need help. I need a source of leadership because I'm manually taking these calls and Googling places in Wisconsin for a University of Wisconsin student that can be helpful. It's so stressful. So what do? Is I start sourcing and thinking of these examples. And something that comes to mind is that I, at the time, was a Black, soon-to-be Michigan grad who's going to work at Google. And I think of our lieutenant governor, who was a Black Michigan grad who worked at Microsoft and then ran for office here in Michigan. So do? I just send him a cold DM on Twitter saying, would you meet with my team for 15 minutes just to give me some advice and some direction? He responds and says, yes, absolutely. He gives us 45 minutes. At the end of that call, I get an unidentified phone number pinging my phone. And it's his chief of staff saying, Aidan, you were asking questions that we actually hadn't thought of as it relates to the COVID response in students. Would you join the lieutenant governor's COVID response task force officially and be someone that we can have as an advisor? And of course I say yes. And that was in 2020. 5 years later, the lieutenant governor is actually the officiant at my wedding next month.
No kidding.
And so when we think about how those, thank you so much, about how we can think about how those cold DMs can manifest into these really positive, productive relationships, it's so special.
That's how we get everybody on here. Like, seriously. I like what you do. I'm going to message them.
Or if we don't even know a lot about what they do, it's, hey, we'd like to know more.
And they're always happy to share.
Do you know who Andy Andrews is? Author of what's the
Traveler's Gift.
The Traveler's Gift is his most known one. It's 7 decisions to make your life successful. So like the buck stops here, form good habits, pray daily,
Smile.
But
I can do that.
But there's 7 decisions that. But anyway, Andy Andrews, my favorite author. I love him. I actually attribute me getting sober partly to him. Emailed him. Finally, I take it as a dude, quit emailing me. That's me a signed book. So I was like, I'll quit emailing you for a month. Now,
what a gift that is.
Yeah.
And also, I had shared this earlier, but it's worth celebrating. 2 years sober. Seriously, that's something to be so proud of.
Thank you.
There are people who live their entire lives who can't get to that point. And so I think it takes a lot of strength and investment and resilience. And I hope that you're celebrating and doing something kind for yourself.
Yes, sir. Well, hopefully we get to see the new
We're gonna go
Insidious.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Not Insidious. What? I'm really doing the only thing I like about it is that guy.
The guy who plays that board.
Yeah, that's the other guy.
What was the driving factor for your ambition before you figured it like more out of life?
You know, I think it was, in all transparency, the example of both my mother and the community that surrounded me. So I saw my mother work multiple jobs just to make ends meet. And even that, for a long time, ends meet is kind of never enough. There's always the mystery bill. There's always that medical expense. Your car breaks down. We had such unreliable transportation, everything. It was just so tenuous at all times. And I thought to myself of, if I could someday be so successful, right, that I could be helpful to her. And then once I started to get to the point to where I was actually getting job offers and, you know, her life was improving, and we've moved her to what is a community now that I can say here in Jackson, to where she can hear the birds, she can go for walks. It's a much more peaceful life. I will still say earlier on, again, talking about the community that gave so much to me, those coaches, those community supporters, those volunteers, I started looking back to myself saying, oh, I should be doing the same thing back. I was 12 years old when I joined student government at middle school at Parkside, right? Because all I wanted to do was sort of, hey, I'm getting so much. Why shouldn't I give some back, if not more? And I think it's a complicated message as well. But when I lived on the corner of 2nd and Middle Street, outside of our door, despite it being a really loving home, it doesn't change the fact that it was violent. It was dangerous. And I color that by saying that really is a consequence of sort of systemic disenfranchisement. What do I mean by that? It's, if you have an example, imagine each and every day you are hounded. Nothing is working out for you. Every solution does not meet the problem. Every single moment that you have is spent just sort of with a distinct lack. What happens when, to use a perhaps bad analogy when, you put this dog in this very, very small and tiny corner, you just continually are, swiping your hand at it. What happens? Eventually the dog might bark or the dog might bite, right? In this sort of way. And so I don't fault these people for any sort of actions or consequence. More so, I grew angry at the environment that we were in. I grew very unsettled that there were folks who literally couldn't eat. I grew tired of the fact that not only could I not get a book bag for school, every single one of my neighbors couldn't either. I grew so frustrated with the fact that it seems like any slight win that we had in our house, maybe my mother's paycheck was just even a tiny bit bigger, we could do something like go to McDonald's and like literally split $1 cheeseburger. Like that was a win for us for so long. I think, and I'm even learning this as I move through life, I think the source of my initial ambition was frankly frustration of this way of life, of the system. And beyond, again, I needed to make sure that I was eating first. It's kind of like when you're on an airplane, if there were to be an emergency, you need to put on your own air mask before others. Yep. I'm in a place now to where I do have a career, and I'm very grateful for it. But now, in terms of what excites me, in terms of what I'm doing all this for long form, it's to ensure that our communities can have some semblance of a better life. And so that's what I wake up every single day and think about is how can I help? The Ann Arbor District Library, we secured a brand new library for no new taxes in Ann Arbor. And folks were asking me, why are you so freaking out about this, right? Like this seems like new libraries are cool, books are cool, but it's so much more than that. Our lives were bearable when we were in the library during the summertime. When we weren't in school during the summer, I was just struggling so much because you don't have programming because you're out of school. You are physically hot because if you are low income, you presumably don't have air conditioning. You're intellectually bored. You also might be a bit food insecure, right? And so the library often has these fun events and snacks and everything else. And again, my mother ensured that I loved to read growing up. And so I think about these community centers and hubs that are so, so important. And so to give you a very long answer, abbreviating it, I think honestly, it is the example of other folks struggling, the example of my mother struggling that makes it so I just want to minimize that as much as I possibly can.
So you said that frustration fueled your ambition first, and then it kind of evolved looking at the community. How did you keep your frustration from turning into resentment and having you spiral like the other way instead of propelling you forward to do the things you've done?
I think it's a fantastic question. So that's something that we see in tandem. When I think about my life, one of the things that I've wrestled with, and just sort of as an adult, so to speak, is overwhelming feelings of guilt, frankly. Me coming from that environment on Biddle Street, it feels like I'm one of thousands, tens of thousands of people who are actually allowed this outwardly sort of manifested positive consequence, right? I get to enjoy these outcomes. And I got to go to college. I got to, have a wonderful home. I got to actually move. I got to go on vacations, later in life. And why was that? I suppose was the central sort of question. I felt massively guilty of, even when I was studying at the University of Michigan, I thought I had multiple jobs where I thought to myself, there are people who are still there and they're never going to know this opportunity. And so that guilt, just to be honest, I'm not doing great with. Every single day I think about, these same folks that lived on the same streets that I did who never made it out, so to speak. And in terms of the hardship that they live with, it's just probably going to remain. I can't have that. And so it's the sort of rejection of that guilt, that push and pull, I think, sort of first. And then secondly, how didn't I allow myself to spiral? I have always, and this is credit to my mother and uncle, I have always had innate responsibility since what feels like day one. I remember it reaching an almost breaking point when I was 16, 17 years old. Things were really bad in our home. There were repeated drive-bys for, just folks in the neighborhood who were upset with other sort of neighbors. Our ceiling was literally leaking, not just during storms, just even a light mist, it would leak. We were hungry. And at 17, I'm starting to think about college. I'm starting to think about what happens next. And I just sort of do a check-in with my mother, just saying, like, I don't really know what we do from here. I'm going to go to college. I hope this works out. What do we do from here? And she has a conversation. I'm going to butcher the delivery, but basically is, my work, my investment, my belief, and my faith in you is that I've always known that you're going to be someone who can turn this around, who can change the entire trajectory and legacy of our family. And that, I sort of sat with that for just a moment, right? And then I'll never forget as well, there's a sort of ... that hung in the air. And she goes, I think you're gonna be able to do that for other people too. And so I think really it is the innate responsibility of belief, right? And knowing that I had to do this for my family, or maybe no one else would. And then I also, I think at a certain point when we're talking numbers, like whatever the statistic is of, how many young, low income Black people in Southeast Jackson have the ability to go to college, the statistic cannot be in my favor. I think that unfortunately it's just a statistic at a certain point. That why was it me and not others? I can point to a number of examples. I can point to my mother. I can point to this coach and the park system and the library system and food stamps and all of these institutions. Maybe it was just because, right? Just some people get to and some people don't. And that is something that I cannot accept. Thank you for the question.
I do have to ask. Sometimes I catch a little grief, whatever, but I ask every guest that is Black. I'm just going to be honest.
Sure.
Because I feel like everybody that watches or young people are like,
Yeah.
oh, that was hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
It fucking was part of my mind. It wasn't. It was
Yeah.
like, it's
It's still happening.
1990 was happening.
Absolutely.
2000 it was happening.
Yeah.
Growing up Black, did you not get as many opportunities, or were you treated differently just because of your color?
I would say so. I have a high school example and a recent example.
Okay.
So when I first came to Jackson High, I had so much going on in the backdrop at home, right? Again, I was low income. I was scared that we were going to even lose the small sort of house and just sense of security that we did have. And so at times that the sort of consequence of that would be I was so high strung, right? And at school, I had so much to say. And sometimes that looked like getting in trouble for having too much to say, right? And so I remember that I kept getting in trouble with a very specific principal who I will say, I'm very stoked to say does not work at Jackson High School anymore. Love to JPS in its entirety, but I have to say I was pretty thrilled to hear that. Who I kept going to the freshman principal office, and the consequences felt far more severe than that of my peers, because I was on the swim team, cross country, and track team, and I'll say the distance track team. Demographically, it was overwhelmingly white in those spaces, especially considering the sort of AP classes that I was in at that time. JPS, thankfully, and I really do mean thankfully, is a melting pot of backgrounds and conditions and ideas, and I loved that. But still, I kept noticing I was saying and doing a lot of the same things that my peers were, and I was the one who was going to the office. And a moment happened when my sophomore year, I was elected class president, and I noticed immediately that there was a shift, particularly with this principal, I will say namely. And it became, he's someone that has, promise. He's someone that actually I misread. I'm seeing that he's actually friends with this family. I'm seeing that he's friends with, this type of student.
I see.
Those detention requests stopped coming in. When I was in the hallway, I wasn't getting the old stink eye, right? And so I found that to be a moment, particularly in retrospect. I would always wonder, why was it me who was singled out, right? We're all doing the same things. Young, rambunctious teen boys. So I will say, in another example, one of the very fortunate sort of moments of my public service career is that I fought like hell for this, but I was selected to be on Governor Whitmer's Growing Michigan Together Council.
Cool.
It was a very flashy thing because it is a very large problem, right? We have people leaving the state of Michigan. We're particularly hemorrhaging young people. And so when I was appointed to this board and I had a number of, speaking opportunities and engagements, I was the only, I think I was literally one of 2 young people on this board. And I was also a young person of color on this board. When you're involved with something that is such a wide interest, right, to the folks of our state, you have people offering opinions, which is at time okay. But I'll never forget, I was speaking at the Detroit Policy Conference about population growth in the state of Michigan. How can we achieve it for young people? How can we achieve it for disadvantaged communities? How can we all get on the same page of growth in a positive way? And I left and my phone was blowing up because thankfully reporters had picked up some of my quotes and I was really proud of the work I had done. Then I log on to Twitter and you see what can only be described as some of the most racist comments you've ever seen in your life from people way up North Michigan, in places that normal people have never heard of in the 83 counties that we have. And I found that to be so disheartening, right? Because here I'm doing what I think is a good thing. And you see folks like with their government name saying these things, right? Should we really be letting someone like this speak on this because of this and that? And so in terms of blockers in my life, I feel very gracious to have the ability to just really tune out a lot of those comments. There was even, when you're the youngest ever Black person elected in Ann Arbor City history, there are a lot of people who have a lot of things to say about that. And I'm going to say that very fortunately, much of it was outstandingly positive, right? This is something, records are meant to be broken, and this is just showing that we're ready for a new era of politics in Ann Arbor and Southeast Michigan. You still have the people who, again, have very different thoughts. And so what do I say to those people? What do I say to those people who, just are, again, racist? I think we can call it what it is. What do we say to those people? I think that despite any sort of administration, despite any sort of national politics, I believe in a country that is kind. I believe in a country that is giving. I believe in a country that loves its neighbors, regardless of who the neighbor is, regardless of where they were born, or regardless of what they look like. I believe in something like that. My neighbors growing up looked very similar to me, and my neighbors now look somewhat like me. And there are going to be instances in which I can help a lot of people who maybe don't look just like me. And that's really important.
I would get bored. It's like, I don't want to go live in a gated community where all the houses look exactly the same.
Totally.
And we have to follow specific sets of rules and do things a specific way.
Absolutely.
And then it's like all like cookie cutter. The line, like working on the line, like it's all coming down the same. That's boring.
Isn't it so boring? I mean, I think to myself, so JPS, when I graduated high school, had about maybe 1,100 or so folks at Jackson High. That sounds about right. And you would meet people who were just so opposite of one another in the same classroom. I think it's actually quite beautiful and a point of access in a meaningful way to have it be that we have someone who lives on the corner of 2nd and Middle Street making $10,000, $20,000 a year, who is talking and joking and learning alongside someone whose parents' net worth is well into the millions, and their sons are talking about the swim team. They're talking about the AP bio class. They're talking about who's going to prom with who. I think that's actually a very, very productive use of time and public resources. This is not an announcement. My fiance and I, we do not have children. We're not going to anytime soon. Just in case my mother's listening, it's not an announcement. But we've talked, just as we're entering into this new chapter for our lives, about what we would want it to look like for our kids. There's no private school in the cards. I'm such a strong proponent of public schools, of public resources in general, because that's where true connection happens. I would be very bored as well.
It's too boring. And then, first of all, the cultures, other cultures are beautiful.
Yes.
Other cultures have delicious food.
Yeah.
Their customs are colorful and vibrant. I don't understand hate.
I don't
really do
either.
not.
And I think it's terrible that we even still have to bring it up, but I make a point to, because really, I think people act like it wasn't that long ago. Like,
Yeah.
it's still very rampant
Today.
Today, it is still.
Suffrage still happens.
Yeah.
Steve, but hate's taught, and I've never hated a person a day in my life.
Totally.
I mean, never. I've always said I'm colorblind. I've been educated by some of my friends that they don't want me to be colorblind because
Sure.
they want me to be aware. And people's lifestyles are different. I get that, but
Yeah.
in the broad sense of things,
Yeah.
I don't care. Black, white, yellow, it's all the same.
Something I like about you is that you're willing to listen and grow from that. I
Yes,
still
sir.
have conversations with my friends as well, to where even if it's not necessarily culturally insensitive, it's just more so there's an opportunity to optimize our language as it relates to other people and cultures. And so as long as we're listening, and in many instances, as long as we're listening and actioning,
Yeah.
here
Well,
we go.
and that's my huge thing is I listen with the intent. I come into a conversation uneducated, and that's the only right way to put it. Like, I'm not ignorant, I'm not stupid.
How do you know
but
something you don't know?
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
It's very fair to say. There are so many things too as well, like even going to the University of Michigan, coming from this very low income environment of Jackson. You have folks walking around with $1,000 Canada Goose jackets on campus
Mhm.
who are going to class, and then they're using a credit card to go and get sushi for lunch. And then from there, they're going to go buy a coffee from Starbucks. And then from there, they're going to actually take whatever sort of fancy ride home back to their paid high-rise apartment, right?
Yep.
I was someone who was in student housing. I was there as a result of a Pell Grant Go Blue Guarantee scholarship, right?
Awesome.
And so it was really important to me to sort of try to assimilate at that time, to learn to speak the language of the
Yeah.
University of Michigan student and everything else. But it took so much out of me to learn, because I felt very out of place in that environment. And I think it's this sort of conversation that we're talking about of how do you know what you don't know? I didn't know that there were people who could close the textbook and then just go to bed and be fine. For me, it was, close the textbook. All right, I'm off to go to my job that I need to do. And then from there, I need to go and study the interview prep. Should I, at the time, just Lord willing, get this Google interview offer, right? That's something that could change my life. And so there was such a long part of my life to where exactly I didn't know what I didn't know. I think that's so important to call out, not just in the situation of college, but just, in day-to-day interactions like this as well.
So, so clearly we try to go in line with your story. Pardon my stuttering. If we don't get to everything, I do want to invite you on for a second one.
Sure.
I mean, definitely.
I'm here for as long as you'll have me.
Perfect. So my next question, I guess, would be: so you graduate JPS, what, 18? Do you go right to college?
Yeah. So I went immediately there.
Okay.
Interestingly, here's some true lore for you. I actually spent, despite having a degree from the University of Michigan, spent my freshman year at Michigan State University.
Okay.
There's that.
Yeah.
I'll even offer you a Go Green.
What was the program? What was the?
So I studied advertising management at the
Okay.
time. I was really not aware yet of the sort of political science engagement bug. I knew I wanted to be in student government, right? But that was, fighting for access for cheaper textbooks and materials, and didn't quite have that switch. And so I thought for a long time, this sounds very different to my life today. I thought I was going to get an advertising degree, and that I was going to move out to California and work in creative advertising and wanted to write the next Super Bowl commercial.
Okay.
And
Cool.
that's what I thought my life was going to be. And my one singular year at Michigan State University truly was so life-changing in that one. I mentioned that I'm getting married next month. I'm looking at the guest list of my friends from college. A lot of them went to Michigan State as opposed to the University of Michigan. Just so relationship based, it's so community driven. Truly love the school, despite my transferring away. And it's you're away from home for the first time. Me and my mother were always so lockstep. I felt very guilty about leaving her to sort of fend for herself in poverty, but we both recognized the long game of me having this degree. And then separately as well, yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome.
Separately as well, it was a terrible time on campus in that. So concurrent to this event that I'll share about, I joined student government, and I was one of the youngest ever people to be on their executive sort of committee. I was 18 years old there. I co-chaired the finance committee. I share all of that because it's a really important sort of footnote. In while I was there, the Larry Nassar crisis happened. And we found ourselves to be in a position where students had no faith in the actual administration of Michigan State University. So where do you go? You come to your student government administration. So I spent the year meeting with survivors, finding and pulling any lever that I could to be helpful to them. And all at the same time, I'm someone who's learning what it's like to be a leader at perhaps a really young age. To sort of, tie a bow of where I think my Michigan State University experience was so valuable. I'll never forget, again, I was chair of that finance committee, and we're talking about there's a program to specifically help women get involved into politics and just higher office and running for formally elected office called Elect Her. It's a wonderful program. And literally, because of the forum that we were in student government, there were people who were debating the merits of us as a body giving money to this cause so that students at Michigan State University could be in one of these programs. And I'm chair of that meeting, so I'm not supposed to insert my own opinion. I'm just supposed to run the meeting and everything else. We have this group of people just vehemently opposed to something like this. Again, keeping in mind the Larry Nassar scandal just happened.
Yes.
Hundreds of women were sexually abused. And you're telling me that you don't want women to receive funding to be in elected office, to be politically engaged? That's disgusting. Again, I couldn't say that, right? There was a student body president at Michigan State University at that time. I'd known him somewhat passively. We're very good friends now. And he's listening quietly. And right as we're about to vote, he says, I would like someone to vote for us to suspend the rules because I have something to say. I'm 19 years old, 18, 19 years old. I didn't know you could do that. I was like, I wish I would have done that earlier. And he comes over quietly and just says, how dare anyone, knowing what these women went through, how could you question additional funding for their advancement? We are in a place as leaders to where what we do here is going to send a ripple effect out to our community, out to the country. We need to make our stance clear. We invest in and support women. Period. That's where the sentence ends. And he was so resolute, but his eyes were watering. His voice was shaking, but it was firm. And I remember just literally looking up at him from my table and thinking to myself, like, I'm never going to forget that. To be clear, the Michigan State governmental body at that time, we voted to give money to this cause. And I'm very, very proud of that. And so when I think about sort of what my defining moment at Michigan State University, it actually wasn't even me really doing anything. It was the example that I had seen, I digested, and I think about that kind of all the time. So I was starting Michigan State University. I was very, very keen again on doing whatever I could to be a success financially and within my community. And I saw the resources of the University of Michigan. Mr. Albelik, again, of Avro Steel, is a diehard Michigan fan. The field house the football team uses was literally a result of him and his generosity. And so I applied to transfer. Awesome. It was everything I ever wanted. I thankfully received acceptance. And from there, it's more student government. It's more grinding for internships. It's more preparation, again, for that moment of graduating and then bringing back added resources and better outcomes to my mother, to myself, to my community.
So two things that I wanted to insert real quick.
Please.
I grew up Catholic. So to get into the sainthood, so like they inducted Mother Teresa into the sainthood.
I think it's you have to perform a miracle, is it not?
Well, no, but they put you in front of this thing and pretty much they vote if you're allowed to become a saint. Okay, so a part of that is they bring in people that oppose it. So just you saying that made me think of there was actually people that showed up to argue Mother Teresa shouldn't be a saint. So if someone's gonna show up and argue that, I mean, I'm sure people argue anything.
Absolutely.
Which is crazy. If you know, but no, it's true. People actually showed up to argue that. It's like, what bad thing do you have to say about her? But they sure found bad things to say.
It baffles me.
Yep. And then before we move on, sorry, I forgot to ask when we were in childhood. What was your favorite cereal?
My favorite cereal. Okay. I got some cuts for you as well. There was something called like Honey O's or something. It's an off-brand cereal that's similar to Cheerios, but it also had those little granola flakes in them. And it was like had a vanilla sort of feel to it. You didn't ask me this. My favorite juice was something that was an abomination. It was similar to high C and orange juice and you sort of merge them together,
Okay.
it was surely just chemicals that I was drinking.
Just all sugar.
Just straight, just sugary poison.
Mhm.
But that was a favorite of mine as well. All off-brand, as you can tell.
No, it's funny that you said that, because that's actually why we ask. It's,
Mhm.
it seems so minute, but you can tell the way somebody grew up from cereal.
Yeah.
Somebody that says Fruity Pebbles, I'm like, probably came from money, or maybe not from money, but a house that didn't care that you ate sugar
Yeah,
in the morning.
yeah.
You had it, you know. Some people say like Frosted Mini Wheats.
We've
I'm like,
had,
okay, you
I
might be in the
literally
middle
did not get cereal.
there.
Yeah.
A couple people say.
I was gonna say it was kind of nice when we had cereal in the house, because that means that we also had milk in the house. So we went shopping recently. So yes,
Man.
So how did you get the liberal arts? You said Pennsylvania?
yes, from the University of Pennsylvania. It was a really interesting sort of structure. So I graduated from the University of Michigan, Bachelor of Arts in Communication and Media. I was particularly interested in scaled sort of communication theory, meaning how is a message made? And then when a message is made, how do we get it to the masses? And then once people like us have the message, how do we interpret it? So like, what's the A, B, and C of just
Right. How do you get something out? Like, how do you make something, put it out there? How do you put it out there? And then how do they receive it?
Yes, absolutely. And then, there's even kind of, I think this is a more advanced step that I will acknowledge in undergrad I didn't really get to. But in D, how do you analyze this sort of potency of a message, so to speak? That answer still somewhat eludes me. I can't stand numbers. But, so immediately after undergrad, I thought to myself, and I think this is really reminiscent of a lot of our conversations today, is I noticed that in these spaces that I was occupying. So think about Google, one of the most prestigious companies to work at in the world. Think about the University of Michigan, thinking about living in Ann Arbor that's so hyper educated. At the time, I was starting to get locally involved in politics. I was starting to follow, these big names that you would see in public service, and they all had advanced degrees. Particularly in a place like Ann Arbor, these folks have law degrees, PhDs, everything else. I just wanted to keep up, but also I wanted to show that I spoke their language. So I looked at programs for me to sort of study that continuation of communication theory and, sort of cultural components of it wherever I could. Frankly, that was as flexible and prestigious as I possibly could, because I wanted to come to the boardroom table. I wanted to go to whatever sort of big time fundraiser where they seek to discredit me and, they find any excuse to. I'd say, actually, we went to the same school. We went to the University of Michigan, and I also have an Ivy League degree, which, you went to Harvard? Oh, very cool. Yes, absolutely. I remember this. I remember that. This was my experience. I do not want them to have an inch on me. I don't want the elite, I don't want the ruling class to be able to discredit me, whether it be off of my race, my education, my lot in life, anything. Because not only is my voice important, so is the voice of everyone else that I represent when I'm in these rooms. And so I went to the University of Pennsylvania. It was a really interesting structure. So I went in a hybrid sort of capacity to where I was able to do it part-time in conjunction with my work at Google. So I have always lived as an adult from 2018, 2021, the dates elude me. I've always lived in Ann Arbor as a full-time adult, but I would frequently fly out to Philly for classroom instruction, for conferences, for special events and things like that. I even have favorite spots in Philly. My fiance loves Philly cheesesteaks. I mean, come on. I was at Kiwi Cobb earlier, and they had a Philly cheesesteak breakfast sandwich. Killer. But
Don't to compete with Philly?
I will say, and I'm not just saying this is not pandering, I legitimately think so.
Okay.
I travel a lot to New York for work, and they have some bagels that I just don't feel compare, genuinely.
Yeah.
Them bagel chips, though.
Insane.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. But yeah, no, I'm very proud of that, and I'm happy I graduated in December of last year. Thank you so much.
Dude, going to 3 prestigious schools,
Yeah.
is that on your resume in itself is wow.
Thank you. I'm reminded. So I graduated from Michigan during COVID. So my formal graduation ceremony was like at my mother's kitchen table with the laptop, right? So my first time actually walking for college was this past December, and I'm sitting waiting for me to be called up to go walk across the stage. And I think I'm a pretty evenly keeled, emotional person. I'm just like openly crying because, I'm of course so excited for me and everything else, but I think in this example, it just showed like what we can do. It shows that someone who, was coming from a low income single parent household, $10,000, $20,000 a year, they can actually also be in these spaces. They can actually also be Ivy League grads, and what it means, right, for people is just a point of example. I have a brief anecdote in that some years ago, I think this would have been 2 years ago, there's someone in Jackson named Kelly Higgins. I don't know if you know her. She's a fantastic person. She actually interned for Senator Sue Schenck as well. Fantastic young person. She's currently at Harvard. And when she gave her valedictorian speech at Jackson Public Schools, which I'm sure you can imagine, of course she was a valedictorian.
Yeah.
She, to my complete surprise, with tears in my eyes, she says, I always aspired for something like Harvard, but seeing Aidan Sova go to an Ivy League university as a young Black, formerly struggling man showed me as a young Black woman that I could do something like that. And I marched forward with even more confidence and strength in doing so. I think of Kelly Higgins seriously every single day. I think of the other people in this world who are going to look at both me and Kelly Higgins when she's a Harvard graduate. They're going to say, well, now there's two people who have succeeded at this level. I want to do the same. And then maybe they'll start asking the questions too. Maybe I should start thinking about what I can do for Jackson, what I can do for my community, what I can do for Michigan. So I'm very proud of my education.
I actually, the only way that I know about that is because the school posts graduates who are going to schools, like what their plans are. And I remember seeing that she was going to Harvard.
She's incredible.
So I asked Chief Pittman this, the cop that I was telling you about prior. So I told him, clearly he remembers me, I remember him, but so, he was reminiscing on a story. I said, man, out of these 50 people, let's say that you remember, you say, I impacted 50 people's lives, right? I'm like, there's 1,000 people that you don't remember that you probably impacted their life. How do you feel like do you, I'm sure you impacted my life, honestly, just being here. I'm sure you impacted Kelly's life. So let's say there's 5 people that for sure you impacted. What about the other 100, 200 that you don't know about? Like, what would you say to them?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, firstly, I'll say that you both have impacted my life by having me on this podcast. And I mean that very sincerely.
Yes, sir.
To ask these questions so intelligently in my hometown and using this as a mode of hope dealing, as you all say, and using this as a mode of spreading positivity and inspiring others is very admirable. And so this is a conversation I'll always remember. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir.
So what would I say to, perhaps the spaceless crowd? Something that I would say is that it is just such a privilege, just to be very, very clear. Each and every day I wake up so outstandingly grateful for the opportunity to do what I do. And I don't just mean, working my fun corporate job at Google. What I mean by this is being on the library board and delivering a new space where folks are going to have better facilities. They're going to have more services, more programming, more books, more items, more everything. And our low income, our disadvantaged, our non-disadvantaged, our high income people, everyone in the city of Ann Arbor is going to benefit from that. I'm grateful to have played even a small part in something like that. I'm glad to have, that minuscule sort of role that I play, downplaying it a little bit. I'm grateful for something like that. When there was a moment here in 2017, I was named the City of Jackson's Youth Citizen of the Year.
Awesome.
And it was a moment where for the first time ever, I was able to tell my story. I felt faceless, right? I felt like this unknown person. Who am I? I'm just a person that struggles, doing my best. I enjoy my friends and community. I want to help. When that happened, I believe 18 years old at the time. I have literally hundreds of people in the city of Jackson saying, I'm a young person. To see you do this, I feel like maybe I could, go that extra mile. I had parents reaching out to me saying that we live in a very, very hard environment. I'm unsure about my kids' welfare and well-being every single day. Seeing you succeed in the way that you did, maybe my kid can actually do this.
Exactly.
Genuinely. And so what do I say? Honestly, I'm just thankful. I'm grateful. I hope to be as helpful as I possibly can. I'm hoping if there are, in your example, there's 200 people who I don't know or I can't visualize who have I've somehow positively impacted their life. I want to really, really intensify, double, triple, quadruple that number just through helping as much as I can. It might be through contributing through something like Grow Jackson. It might be elected office. I might pivot and start my own nonprofit. It might be, I don't have aspirations for this. Maybe I become a dancer, right? And I'm dancing through Jackson and Ann Arbor and telling stories. It doesn't really matter. I just, whatever happens from here, I hope to be helpful.
What
You hit the nail on the head with that. That's all we care about. Is
Thank
we
you.
just want to be helpful. That's what it boils down to.
Absolutely.
We just want to be
There
helpful.
are going to be evolving needs in the community. 5 years from now, there might be a massive sort of push for new animal shelter, just as a random example, right? I'm going to learn everything I can about fundraising for an animal shelter, right? I'm going to learn as much as I can about the importance and statistics associated to animal shelters in a thriving community, right? We're flexible sort of inherently. My mother growing up, again, she was very emotionally supportive, and we were very much allowed to have emotions in the household. But there were moments, right, when you are facing, threat of eviction, you do have a really bad circumstance to where we understood that if there was a job to be done, you did it, right? Because if we don't do this, we might be homeless. If we don't do that, we might not eat. If we don't do that, when I thought to myself in college, I did not party. I was a nerd. I was in my dorm room doing exactly what I needed to do because there was a job to be done. And if I didn't do it, I was going to go back home and it was going to be devastating. And so I'm just very big on that. And so I think that there's a lot of power in, frankly, just doing our jobs. And I see me afforded added opportunity to do my job exceedingly well.
That's all you can ask anybody.
What advice would you have for a young high school student?
Young high school student. So I feel very strongly about this, actually, to get involved as much as you possibly can in two sorts of ways. One, it's your school has clubs. Those are very, very good. I was on 3 sports. I was on student government. I was in the sort of class pride. I was in youth advisory committee. I was in NHS, all these different things. And that actually allowed me, when I went to college, to find a streamlined opportunity for community and service. There was no question, day one, when I got on that campus, I was finding out we're student government here. And I instantly had friends. I instantly had purpose. That was really important for me. That doesn't mean that you have to do it for the rest of your life, but it is good to know to just it helps you find yourself, a little bit. Also helps pad your resume to college, which is something we can't ignore. But secondarily, I find the opportunities of service have been the most enriching sort of part of my life. It doesn't just need to be with your school. I grew up, my grandmother, who had a very severe MS that I mentioned to you all, we would visit as frequently as we could, mostly weekly even. And doing that, my mother was insistent, particularly because we were staying for such long periods of time, we would also volunteer. I volunteered at Maple Lawn Hospital Maple Lawn in Coldwater for about age, however, 2, 3, right? I was passing chips around until her passing when I was about 15, 16 years old. I developed such empathy and just, a need, right, to serve in that sort of way through there. But also, again, I was getting involved with the Jackson Community Foundation and things like leaf relief, where you're literally raking leaves in exchange for canned goods so that there are folks here in Jackson who can eat during Thanksgiving, right? There are opportunities both within your school and within your community. And I think that you become a much more well-rounded person, not just professional, although again, there are perks to that, but just as a person, you can learn what makes you you and also like how to help. I think ultimately, again, it's super cool to work at Google and change your life and buy a house and have financial security. But like, ultimately, that's a means for me to be helpful. Right. And so that's something I'm really, really passionate about. It's just like, do all the things you can. You have energy, you hopefully have time. Just sort of get after it.
How do you avoid burnout?
Oh, fantastic question. My fiance, if she were here right now, she would just be staring daggers at me.
I know that feeling.
How do I avoid burnout? I'm very mindful that this is a true marathon. When I first started working at Google, my life sort of was a bit chaotic, and then I had the 9 to 5. But again, I was also a part-time master's student. I was on the Human Rights Commission in Ann Arbor. I was also on many boards and everything else. And then I also made the decision I want to run for public office. So all of those things coming together meant I was working 80, however many hours a week.
Mhm.
There would sometimes be a day where I didn't work all of it. Maybe on a Sunday, I sort of slept in, took a lazy day or whatever. And again, that guilt that we've talked about during this conversation would come back of like, I'm in this very lucrative, very prestigious and very like rare situation. How could I possibly sit down right now? What disrespect to those that, again, are still in poverty, that are still, in that negative environment? What disrespect? I quickly realized that if I didn't take rest, that burnout would just happen whether I liked it or not.
Yep.
And so it was really important to me, again, to think of this as a long form journey. It's okay to take rest. You're encouraged to take rest. I'm very thoughtful of compartmentalization in that. So I have days that exclusively are just dedicated to my 9 to 5. I'm not sort of context switching. I'm just focused on my job, and that's that. There are days where I leave at 3 and then I go to the community meeting and then I have a board meeting. And then previously when I was studying, I would do some homework, I would do this and that. And, now my weekends are more reserved for, again, being out in the community. I'm bringing my fiance with me so that can be a shared sort of point of interest in the community and everything else. And so how do I avoid burnout? I'm very mindful of the long game. I'm trying to compartmentalize as much as I can. And I will just even offer, I don't think I'm crazy good at avoiding burnout. I'm learning every single day. I will say it's helpful to authentically enjoy what you do. We had, in the last 6 months, in securing that new library in Ann Arbor, we had a special election to do it. The last 4 or 5 months of that were pretty brutal. Like with any election, there's name calling, there's bad faith attempts, there's just more work to be done. You're rolling up your sleeves, you're knocking on doors. It was really, really hard. Just in general, not just for me, but for everyone who believed in this new library for folks. And so that was a sprint. I really wasn't resting in that sort of time period. But now I'm in a season to where I'm more so prepping for my wedding next month. Things are going very well on my 9 to 5. We're coming off of, again, a very successful election. And so I'm able to sort of, foot off the gas a bit. In all of the examples that I just shared over the last 4 or 5, however many months, I loved even the hard moments. I loved even when I was tired. Like it felt like such a privilege to get home at 11 or 12 and just fall into bed. You're almost laughing. Like you can't believe it's happening. Like you finally met the end of your day. And I think that that's helpful.
How do you practice self-care though?
Self-care. So I used to do in my bachelor days when my fiance did not live together. I used to once every 2 months. This is not a joke. I would turn my phone on Do Not Disturb for an entire weekend. I would exclusively order food. I would not answer the phone. I would not answer any texts or calls, anything. Watch Netflix. I would read. I would, watch old Dragon Ball Z reruns.
Whatever you wanted to do.
Whatever it was I wanted to do. It's a little bit more difficult nowadays in that, again, I love living with my fiance, of course, but, you live in a shared space. So what I've been doing instead, and this feels much more reasonable to me, is I schedule once per week just a blank, empty evening where I can. Sometimes it looks like me and her name is Ina, we do something, or it looks like just me literally just having quiet time. And I'm very much an extrovert, but even an extrovert has their limits. And it also looks like, coming here, we're in Jackson right now, of course. I'm here every other weekend to visit my mother.
Oh, okay.
And when I'm here, it is more quiet. We do go for walks. We do have quiet sort of kitchen table conversations. We reminisce, we talk. And in that's a really good way for me to recharge as well. So I often, whether it's just reminiscing or just the power of a very strong relationship in my life, I go back to Ann Arbor, I go back to whatever work that I'm doing pretty invigorated, right? If I remember what I'm doing this for, because inevitably the conversation becomes, you remember when that really bad thing happened? And it's like, yes, it's all I see when I close my eyes, Mother.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so I find, as usual, as many of my answers are centered around, it's centered around my family, my friends, my community. And then also occasionally just some Aidan shut it.
Natural supports.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'll give about a 10-minute warning. But I never want to cut you off. So if you're like, don't be fixated on it.
Sure.
I just want to give you the heads up.
Of course.
We run everyone about an hour and 15 minutes. I feel like people start to lose interest after that time. I mean, just being, like
No,
one
absolutely.
episode or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
I'm trying to keep it like TV, like, okay, one episode about an hour.
Yeah.
But I would like to invite you on Clear Up when we talk about that.
Of course.
So just so about 10 minutes to our wrap-up questions. We ask the same questions of every guest. But a couple of questions before that. What was the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Best piece of advice I've ever received. I'm glad I have an answer because I feel like I used to not have an answer. So 2020, it's COVID. Things are really weird. And I am thinking to myself, I'm fortunate that my family has not been directly impacted by COVID. Yep. Everyone appears to be safe. I just had that first Google check come in. So, we're doing better than what we were. But still, I was restless to a point to where I had so much energy that it became almost negative, and the entire world had stopped. Again, I'm acknowledging the privilege, right? We didn't have anybody that lost their life or a family member or anything, but just materially, I was up a wall throughout the entirety of COVID. And it was at this point where you think you're about to graduate college, you're about to go and do all these things to where you would be actively doing a lot of things. I couldn't do a lot of things.
We're doing a lot of things.
Oh my God. I was literally, my guest room at my mother's house, right, was so small, but I was still just lapsed.
Walking back and
just thinking about what I could do in the future, how I can be helpful, everything else. Yeah. At the time, I actually went on randomly through a connection through the Michigan football team, where I was an intern, which I was an intern because of my connection to Mr. Algolick as well. Of course, a hardworking work ethic and resume as well, but just his influence, right? It goes. So connections. I'm on a podcast, and I'm told, you should really meet this person. His name is John Levy. And he's a titan of the legal industry. He's someone you should definitely meet. And I wasn't really interested in law school at the time, more of a student government kid. I knew that tangentially I might want to be involved in politics. Anyways, I go, oh yeah, I'll meet with him. We get on the phone, and again, I'm feeling so antsy. And I ask him, after many conversations, the central sort of question of, I actually kind of think that I want to change this about myself. I don't think this is good. That I feel this chronic restlessness. And you're someone of high stature. You were involved with Legal Services Corporation. You're a very established attorney. You should maybe know a little bit about this. I think I want to change this. How did you change this about yourself? And he said to me, I myself have had this for the entirety of my life. I have had this chronic restlessness that we've talked about. And I've actually mentored a number of young people who have had the same sort of problem. And they all come to me, one person in particular, who has said, similar to you, I think I want to change this about myself. This doesn't feel sustainable. This doesn't feel good. And I give the same advice every single time. I think that not only should you embrace this chronic restlessness as we're talking about, I think you just flat out need to embrace who you are. You are authentically this now. That is okay. You can find ways to channel that. But it's really important, and it was really important to me, some of my mentees, one in particular, and you, that you do this. And I'm listening to all this. I'm like, okay, John, who the hell are you talking about? Who are the mentees? Who is this one person that felt just particularly jazzed up a wall? And he goes, oh, well, I thought you had read my Wikipedia. And I was like, oh, I'm not as well researched perhaps as I should be. Yeah, what's on your Wikipedia? And he goes, well, I told this to President Barack Obama.
Oh shit!
Before I introduced him and Michelle Obama together, I'm just like, John.
What are you saying?
And it's true. He's the person. He's this legal titan who introduced the Obamas, and John also later on was appointed by President Obama to be the leader of the Legal Services Corporation. And he told me, he goes, I'm going to send you one of the president's books. And I want you to read one of the very first pages. I'm like, okay, cool. The very first page, I'm not exaggerating, talks about how his own chronic restlessness is what drove him to run for United States Senate. like page number 1.
No.
I feel like this isn't talked about a lot because even if I am tired from work, it's like, Nathan, I'm bored. Nathan, I'm bored.
Totally.
Like
Yes.
I'm tired of doing my game and
Yeah.
thing and like after work. And there are times where like, even if I'm exhausted, I'm like, I just am bored.
Oh my God.
Like I can jump on a plane right now.
Absolutely, and we'll go. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that boredom, that restlessness, whatever you want to call it, will drive you to do a lot of very big, important things. I genuinely do. If you think about, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, literally, this was like it wasn't just boredom, but it was like,
Of course.
we're not doing enough. Like,
Right.
we have to do something more.
I always feel that. And I think that there's something to be said. If you think of insert any person in the scope of history that you all look up to or enjoy, they feel that same thing, that they needed to be doing more. So again, Senator Shink is someone who's coming on this podcast.
Yep.
She's not only a friend of mine, but she is someone who I look up to very, very much. And when I originally asked her, you've been on the County Board of Commissioners, you've had this very, very successful life of public service.
Mm-hmm.
Why and how would you want to run for something like state senate? That sounds really hard, right? It sounds really, really hard. You have to work 1 million hours a week. You have to campaign. You have to fundraise, everything else. And she said that she feels that she could be doing more for our community.
Yep.
And she wants to be the person to do that. She feels that she is the person to do that.
I'm excited to interview her.
As you should be. Incredible.
Yeah.
And, sometimes I think it's just that simple. Sometimes you're restless, sometimes you're bored. And I think the best advice I've ever gotten was from John Levy, where he encouraged me just to accept who I am. Now, of course, there's outlets for it to where we can use them productively, but just that was a big unlock because I went into that conversation genuinely wanting to change something about me. I wanted to, frankly, like be normal and just sit still and just, exist, right? And to have that unlock, to have that encouragement that it's all right, just changed my life.
Well, and some people are higher calling. Not necessarily your purpose is more important than another purpose, but there's a reason why you are the way you are.
Yeah.
I mean, really,
And I'm perfectly comfortable. I've been thinking very seriously about the deliverance of this new library to Ann Arbor. If that is the only consequence of me being this way, I will absolutely die happy. I mean that seriously, because thinking about the thousands of people who are going to benefit from expanded public services, even if it's just one thing. I think about that so much. Even if we can just change one person's life, even if we just change one thing materially for the better, it's very kind of you to say. Thank you.
Yes, sir, of course. So our wrap-up questions are all the same for every guest. I want to formally invite you back on maybe a month or two, let this one sit, and see, but I definitely, because I do not feel like we even touched half of what I wanted to. So I can only imagine what you're probably like, we didn't touch this.
We did modify one of the questions. We talked about this, remember?
I do
How we
not-
wanted to ask stuff.
Is there this is probably the one, but is there anything that I didn't ask that I should have? Is there anything you would like to share?
Oh my goodness. Anything that you should have. Well, one thing I will say is that sometimes people ask me the question, and we touched on this a bit, why do you think that you are enjoying these outcomes that you are today? And again, it's family and community, as I mentioned earlier. And it's also the library that we had talked about, just in terms of that was really a safe haven for us, particularly during the summers. I ask and encourage folks not to discredit the value of our parks and recreation system, not just in Jackson, not just in Ann Arbor, but everywhere in our country. We are very, very fortunate in the city of Jackson to have an unbelievable park to walkability ratio. That means that the majority of people in Jackson can actually walk to a park. That's kind of insane for a place of this size and population to enjoy that factor. Me and my mother, again, transportation was always a bit nebulous, it was a bit hairy. And so what we would do is we would walk down 4th Street, we would walk to our Falling Waters Trail, we would walk to Cascades. One of my first ever jobs, I was actually employed by the Parks and Recreation Department. If you can follow me here, my first job ever, I was an aide to the lifeguard's assistant, which just meant that I carried around clipboards and hopped in the water every once in a while. Probably not supposed to say this, but I got paid in Subway gift cards for the summer. It was awesome. I went home feeling like me and my mother were rich. And, not only the employment and learning opportunity, but I would see how important it was getting in the pool for the summer. I saw how important it was that we had, the soccer rec league over the summer. And for fairly inexpensive cost, right? It would be for about 3 weeks of swim lessons, if my memory serves, about $15 or so. I will just be candid in saying that $15 or so was a lot of money to us at the time, but 3 weeks of value and joy and education in that time period, I really think that that's something that really changed our lives. And so when I think about, and in my own work, how can we better protect and service public resources and community institutions? I think of our library, I think of our park systems, I think of recreation initiatives, I think of just the beautification of our city in general, because we would sometimes literally just go sit downtown and read a book and just kind of enjoy the people that we had seen, the birds that would come and fly by near us. And we didn't have bright walls then, right? We didn't have this investment in the downtown then. And so as we're talking about the future of Jackson, as we're talking about the future of Ann Arbor, as we're talking about growing our state together, it's really important to me that these things that I think even we're all liable to sort of not give enough credit. We're all to sort of take for granted, right? In this way, it was the Parks and Recreation system, it was the library, and it was just the simple sort of placemaking initiative of Jackson. I think that really made a huge difference in my upbringing.
So the part we talked about adding was asking if you were happy on how you told and delivered your story.
Yeah, I think so. I feel one of the things that I struggle with in telling my story is that there are so many different components. I think I've painted a lot of really broad strokes today, but there are hundreds of people and stories and details that I could have offered today in terms of, even me saying something simply earlier of like the sort of care of my track coach. That's an hour right there of the investment time, dollars, and resources that I received from that singular person. And so I'm always trying to give everyone their flowers as best I can, because I think I'm here because I'm sitting on the shoulders of not just one person of my mother, but, hundreds of people in our community. So I think as best as one reasonably could. I think so. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here. You all ask wonderful questions. I think that's part of the reason why it's easy to be here chatting with you all.
Well, see, and that's some of our problem. Somebody like you, I know, has a big story. So, like, if we have a story of the MSU, then we have a story of Michigan. I mean, we'd be down here for 10 hours. I get that.
There are difficulties with some people who do not have confidence in delivering their story, or they will be nervous to the point where it's like one-word answers.
Sure.
So
Where it's like pulling teeth for little tidbits.
So sometimes we don't know what we're getting.
I'm the opposite. I love to give you a lot of words.
No, actually, it's very, the word eludes me. Digestible?
Yeah.
Good. Oh, I'm happy to hear that.
So my last wrap-up question,
Please.
what is your definition of success?
My definition of success, I will say widely, I think as a society, I would really like us to think in that sort of two-pronged example that I mentioned earlier of if you're someone who's low income or disadvantaged, how I was, please, in that plain example, put on your own sort of air support mask first. Make sure that you're in a position to where you and your family are safe, you have positive outcomes. If there is some sort of crisis, you might even have a little stockpile to help make sure that you're not in the negatives. Just make sure that you can be okay, right? Once you are, I really think success is also, in addition to your own financial ability or career sort of climbing or whatever it is, also there needs to be a community component. It doesn't need to be running for office. It can be something like I'm the person who organizes our weekly bowling league. And there are a lot of people who are really happy and touched by that league. I am someone, this is a real example of someone I met recently. I'm someone who hosts master gardening competitions in the state of Michigan. And I open up my home for folks to come and do this. And I'm really proud of that organizing effort. There are people who, taking Grow Jackson, for example, it is both a career and a means for folks to eat fresh, healthy foods in Jackson in a way that's accessible. I consider that to be a success, right? You have your own sort of personal career sort of mobility and progress, and you're considering your community. So I think it's both. I think, again, take care of yourself, succeed where you'd like to, and then also think about the ways you can help out your neighbor, whatever else. I will say for me personally, in terms of, I'm very happy to be out of the negatives, so to speak, where when I started at Google, I had negative monies, right? And now I have some monies.
Yeah.
And I'm looking to be in a place to where I can be a public servant, maybe even full time someday. And I'm looking to be in a place too, to where you've heard, even just in this brief hour, all of the ways our shared community has helped and uplifted me. I mean, dozens of examples just tonight alone. I just want, it would feel almost disrespectful for me to not pay back dozens and dozens and dozens of examples of service, of help, of care. So for me, I'm very grateful for people who say, Aidan, you're so successful, you're this and that, whatever. And I accept that, and I'm so grateful for folks who say that. But for me, I don't feel like I'm done yet. I feel like I got a lot more to give before I can personally say that I'm that way.
Perfect.
If you could meet younger you, would you get along with younger you, and vice versa? Would younger you get along with you now?
Wow. So define younger me. What age would you like? Because it varies.
Let's say 15.
Okay, so
15?
yeah,
15.
young adult, 15.
Okay. So 15, I was very fiery. I had, again, all this energy that we were talking about, and I didn't have an outlet exactly for it yet. So I would say a class clown. I would say that I had a lot of good ideas, and I do think maybe even then I was, building to be a leader. But I think that if 15-year-old Aidan were to be here right now, it'd be a little jokey. That's all right. 15-year-old, young boys often are. But I think that we would have like a really productive conversation, because even at 15, I was having a lot of big thoughts. When I tell you about that summer job that I had when I was the AIDS lifeguards assistant in that way, hilarious. Yeah. I would walk all the way from 502 West Middle to Parkside, or what was previously Ella Sharp Pool. And that walk is like 50 or so minutes. And the way that the days were segmented, you had a morning and afternoon class. So I'd walk an hour, go work for about 3 hours, walk an hour back, chill for a couple hours, and then walk back. So it was about like 4 hours you're walking yesterday. So I lost all my like baby fat, was just all the walking over the summer. But the sort of point was, in those walks, the streets feel endless. They feel very long. And it's just a 15-year-old young man with a lot of thoughts and a lot of emotions and a lot of questions. You're starting to figure out, maybe your situation at home isn't normal. Maybe there are kids your age who have a bit more. And maybe you are starting to think about the sort of anger and frustration that you feel that your life and situation is different. So despite 15-year-old Aidan being such a class clown, as we'll say, I think he had maybe a couple of profound thoughts to share. So I think that we would get along well. And I like to think that he would think I'm somewhat cool. If not cool, at least someone he'd want to hear more from. But I think we get along fairly well, I'd say.
If you have one word, cannot be a makeup word, has to be a real word, to describe your entire journey from where you started to where you are now to where you would like to end up.
I'll say one word: fantastical. This feels like a fantasy to me every single day. It feels genuinely like I've lived two different lives. Because when you are without for so long, and you only know, just disparity, you only know disenfranchisement, you in your mind, even if you're hopeful for brighter days, you always have something in the back of your head that says you're not going to get this. And then over on the other side of things, when you operate, in material abundance, not just a mindset, right, but actual abundance of opportunity and outcome and resources, it feels entirely separated from one another. A lot of folks feel, whenever I tell stories of, the old days of poverty versus the new days of, abundance in this sort of way, folks think that naturally the feelings would be pretty married to one another. And absolutely entirely untrue. It feels like I'm truly living out a fairy tale. Where like, not only can I take care of my family, but I also get to help other people too. Wow.
Yep.
And so I come at each and every day, like, so grateful. And so, like, I think, my hope, right, is that in fairy tales, they live happily ever after. And so for me, living happily ever after looks like I've done a really good job. I've been a good man. I've been a good husband. I've been a good community leader. And I can leave whatever corner of the world just even slightly better. And hopefully I can do the same for my future children. Again, not an announcement. I think that we can say that this fairy tale has ended very happily.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming on.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me, you both.
Before we do this for every guest, for people coming from out of, I don't know why I'm stuttering at the end of this. For people coming out of traveling.
Yeah.
We just get a gas card this week.
Thank you.
We just did mobile, $20.
Thank you. That's very generous. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Oh my gosh. Of course.
Coming on.
Thank you for having me.
And then we'll turn off the camera, but we sign our table.
Yes. Oh, I'd be so happy to.
Thanks for watching, guys. All right.
How'd that feel for you both?
I think it felt pretty good. Did you enjoy?
Oh my God. I had to